Southgate's 5 most controversial decisions as England boss reaches milestone. There were some reasonable doubts raised about Gareth Southgate's appointment in September 2016 when he succeeded the ousted Sam Allardyce. But it is safe to say those fears have been firmly put to bed. Given his struggles in his first managerial role at Middlesbrough in 2007, it could be said that managing at international level, where the day-to-day rigors of football are not as strenuous, was more suited to Southgate. He also had knowledge of the exciting talent emerging from the national pool after spending 4 years as England under-21's boss. The Football Association clearly felt he was worth taking a gamble on. Some may argue, perhaps fairly, that this is the best generation of England players for some time, and that Southgate is merely fortunate enough to be in charge of them. But there is something about the mild-mannered coach that endears him to the players and to the fans. He rarely loses his composure, stays grounded when others threaten to reach too high in their ambitions, and has the backing of the entire country. Completing that particular hat trick is a rare achievement for any England coach. October 8 marks 5 years since Southgate took charge of his first England game, a 2-0 win over Malta, and this nation has been on a hell of a ride: a World Cup semi-final in 2018, the Nations League finals in 2019, and, of course, the Euro 2020 final defeat. But there have been some controversial decisions along the way, and Daily Star Sport has taken a look back at those moments and what happened next. Will Gareth Southgate lead England to glory at the 2022 World Cup? Comment below. In the end, Southgate didn't have to make the choice as it was done for him. But it was almost inevitable that in selecting his final 26-man squad for Euro 2020, Trent Alexander-Arnold would be one of the unlucky 7 left out. The Liverpool full-back had worked tirelessly to prove his manager wrong after a slump in form during the 2020-21 campaign and found form again at club level. Leaving the 22-year-old at home would have been a huge call. After all, Alexander-Arnold's tender age is no barometer for his wealth of experience, given he has already played in 2 Champions League finals and made 185 appearances for the Reds. He is widely regarded as one of the finest crossers and passers in a defensive position in the world, as evidenced by his 35 assists for the club in the Premier League. Leaving out the Merseyside-born defender would have been a hugely unpopular call from Southgate, and he might have been grateful that he wasn't the one to give Alexander-Arnold the bad news. Of course, the prelude to the debate over England's Euro 2020 squad and Alexander-Arnold's potential exclusion was the abundance of right-backs available to select. Kyle Walker was a regular in the squad, as was Atletico Madrid's Kieran Trippier. That left the question of who to pick from Alexander-Arnold and Chelsea's Reece James. But instead of making the tough decision to exclude one, or even 2 of them, Southgate found a way to justify including them all in his provisional 33-man squad. Walker would form a part of his 3-man defense, providing the recovery pace that neither Harry Maguire nor John Stones had. Trippier, meanwhile, was unsuccessfully deployed as a left-back against Croatia. That was despite having 2 able, left-footed full-backs in Ben Chilwell and Luke Shaw available to play. From the outside, it made little sense, especially when in-form players such as Jesse Lingard and set-piece specialist James Ward-Prowse were left out of the squad, and Southgate was forced to defend his decision after scrutiny from the media. Following a series of breaches from Premier League footballers of coronavirus regulations in the UK, Southgate had made it abundantly clear to this squad that they had to stay in the bubble when they visited Iceland for the Nations League clash. But on the eve of the clash in Reykjavik in September 2020, it appeared that Phil Foden and Mason Greenwood didn't get the memo. The pair were caught bringing 2 girls to their hotel room, which breached the regulations in Iceland at the time. Both Foden and Greenwood were sent home by Southgate and forced to apologize for their unacceptable behavior. The 51-year-old had no option but to axe the pair from his squad after such a blatant case of insubordination. But the whole incident was a regrettable moment for Southgate and his England squad when times were extremely difficult back home. It was hardly ideal preparation for Southgate that just a week before England were due to fly to Portugal for the inaugural Nations League finals, there was an All-English Champions League final. Several members of his squad, including Harry Kane, Jordan Henderson and Eric Dyer, would go on to feature in the final. It had been a long season and Kane was barely 70% fit, not alone 100%. It was decided after that Southgate would leave Kane out of his starting side for the semi-final clash against the Netherlands, with Henderson joining him on the sidelines. Southgate was powerless to avoid such a scenario, with any further injury to Kane risking sparking a club versus country war. But to then bring on the struggling striker, when Marcus Rashford had already scored, was a baffling choice. The Dutch went on to acclaim a 3-1 win in Lisbon, and deservedly so after some catastrophic defensive errors. It was a night to forget all around. Even if it was a newly created competition, England hadn't won anything of note at international level for 53 years. And leaving Kane out almost resigned the Three Lions to their fate before the match even begun. Even some months after the final had come and gone, the debate raged on about who should have taken a penalty in the Euro 2020 final against Italy. But perhaps that was the wrong question. Perhaps it should have asked who did not want to step up. Southgate received a barrage of criticism over his decision to allow Rashford, Jadon Sancho and Bukayo Saka to take penalties in the shootout, with the young trio all missing from 12 yards. It later emerged that Jack Grealish had put himself forward for a spot kick, only to see Southgate choose one of his teammates instead. Such a decision will be thrust into the spotlight when a team loses, but to ignore a player courageous enough to step up felt like an error on his part. Of course, penalties are a lottery, and as a head coach, Southgate could only watch on like the rest of the nation. But England had come closer than they had ever been to winning the European Championships, and that only makes the pain greater.